everybody, how you doing? This is Tony to you here from Renewables in Africa. So hoping that you had a great week so far. So now we have COP26 that's done now, done and dusted. It's more than a week. And we're going back to our usual self, right? Our usual life. And the question now that is everybody's mind. So how are we gonna apply all those decisions, all those measures that have been taken at COP26? So how can we move into the energy transition? So what is it going to be? What is it going to mean for us citizens, right? So that's what we want to find out. And how is it possible? Because at the moment we still run very much by a world that is using fossil fuel. And if we're saying that we're going to move into energy transition using more renewables, so how is it going to make it possible? What's going to enable that? Hey, this is exactly what we're going to talk about here, right, in this channel. So my name is Tony Chu, as I mentioned to you. And in this channel, what you get is all the information you need to demystify the renewable energy sector to make it easy for you, right? Whether you're an investor looking to invest money into the sector, or you're a professional, you want to come into the sector because you say, hey, this is the future for me. I want to take it further. Find the information here. Last but not the least, if you're a business, you're looking for a solution, hey, the good old Tony can give you the information. I know. Something looks different. I'm wearing glasses here. Well, in fact, I'm wearing glasses all the time. It's just like when I don't have them, I have my contact lenses. So I thought, let me look a little bit different, right? Because we're talking about transition here. Okay, so great to see you as usual. So now let's move into our topic, shall we? Okay, this is fine. So we're talking about the renewable energy, right? The energy transition. So moving from fossil fuel all the way to a cleaner world where we're going to be using much more of clean energy sources. So how is it possible? What are the technologies that makes it happen? Do you know? I'll be quite curious to find out what you have to say about that. But what I want to tell you here is to give you 5 key technologies that people are using to transit us into this new world. Are you okay? That's great. So let's start. So let me share my screen. But before I do that, have you already signed up for the channel? What are you waiting for? This is the time to do it, right? Because all the job that I'm doing here is to make sure that you can sign up, you can bring people that will like this video, and you can leave me your comment. And as you know, there's a notification button. If you press that, you know that for every single video that I'm running, you are notified. And the great thing since last week is we're not only just projecting this live on YouTube, but also on LinkedIn. Isn't it fabulous? Excellent. Great. Now, let's talk about those 5 technologies. What are they? Do you have an idea? Drop that in the comment box and I want to find out. But for now, let me share my screen with you and I'll let you know what I have for you. Okay, let's do that. So I'm just going to start by showing my screen. Yeah. Should be able to see that in a minute. Whoa. Oh, that's it. Okay. This is the first technology that we need to be using, which is utility scale batteries. Yes, as you can see, I'm showing the Tesla model here, but you also have obviously other manufacturers because we're saying that we're going to be using more renewables energy. So what's the challenge of renewables energy? Or at least the more mature technologies, solar and wind. So we know that they're intermittent, right? And that means that you may have lots of sun at a time, you don't need it. And also, how are you going to do it during the night, right? So that's a problem. The wind as well. When it's very windy, it could be at the time where the demand for power is actually quite low. So how do you capture that to make sure that you use that at a relevant time? This is where you have your batteries. And the reason I'm talking about utility scales batteries here is because when you have those large solar farm between about 20 megawatts, 30 megawatt, 50, 100 megawatt, and so on and so forth, you can imagine the huge amount of power, right, that can be captured. And it would be a shame to lose that. Yeah, that's very much important because one thing that you need to know is the capacity factor, which is essentially the amount of time you can actually use the solar power is actually 30%. If you compare that to what is the maximum amount of power that is possible to generate with that. It's just 30% that you can actually use. But the reality is by using those batteries, you can capture some of the power to make sure that you can turn it and use it at the relevant time that you need. And that's why you need those huge batteries. So Tesla is one of the models that has developed that. But as I say, there are other technology looking at that. So this is the first technology. So is it clear for you? Excellent. Let me now move you into the second technology. And we are still in the batteries. Now, you could be asking me, so how, Tony? So what is the difference with what we have seen before? Oh, when we say behind the meter, it simply means that, okay, we're talking here to the customers, to the users, basically. If you can imagine, you have already, obviously, this is behind the meter that connects you, the connecting point to the grid. Yeah, if you're looking at behind that connection point, you're talking about now the amount of power of load that is used on site by the users, right? This is very much important. So how can we make sure that for the power that is on site, the load profile, we can collect part of the power that is generated by renewable energy, for example, and make sure that we can still use it at a relevant time. So basically the same principle that we had for the grid, the difference is here you had on site, you're on a factory. Let's say, for example, you have a factory that is using solar power or is using wind power. Same thing. What's happened when it's windy, but they can't, but the factory doesn't need this power just right away. Are we going to waste this power? Are we going to give it back to the grid? If you can give it back to the grid, that's fine. So that means you probably have net metering. But for many countries, for example, many countries in the African continent, the net metering policy is not yet implemented. It may be in the textbook, but it's not yet implemented. So are you going to waste that power you generated? Yeah, that excess power? No, you're not gonna lose that. That's where you want to capture that using those behind the meter batteries and make sure that again you can use this power at the relevant time of your choice, right? So this is the second technology. And as you would imagine, those behind the meter batteries will be smaller than the utility scale batteries, right? So that means that's the difference we have between the two. So I would say the principle is exactly the same. The difference is the size, isn't it? Great. So that means, for example, for such a system as the one that I'm showing here, you may have something that's, for example, 2 megawatt in capacity, right? Whereby you have for the utility scale, it could be 10 times even more bigger than that. So that's the difference between the two. Is it clear? Excellent. Now, I want to move you to the third technology that I believe is necessary to make sure that we can move into a new world where we're using more renewable energy. Are you still enjoying it? Excellent. Let's have a look at that. And I'm sure it's not a surprise to you. Smart charging, right, for electric vehicle, right? That's great. And as you can see here, that's an image of the charging stations as we have it in China, for example. Because we are talking about batteries. Because I mentioned it's one of the videos that I was sharing that, right? That transport, it's one of the big sector that is producing lots of carbon emissions. So we need to decarbonize this sector, and part of it, of those emissions coming from transport, it's coming straight from obviously the fleet, right? The vehicle fleet. So you want to decarbonize that, and one way to decarbonize that is to have electric vehicles, so vehicle that would function with electricity as opposed to fossil fuel, right? That's what we have. But if you're saying that you're going to be using EVs, you want to be able to charge it. And the trouble is, as you can imagine, for convenience of the users and also to make sure that user can switch into EVs, you want to make sure that they are able to charge the battery, to charge their vehicle when they where they want and when they want, right? And you need to make sure that it is not too long. You almost need some superchargers, so you need the infrastructure that go with that. Because as you would imagine, at the moment when you are driving your car, you're enjoying it, listen to the music. You go, I don't know where you want to go. And you realize, oh, look at the fuel gauge. I almost have no power left. What do? Next thing for you is to look at where is the next petrol station? How far is it? Let me stop here, refuel it, yeah, and fill up the tank and then carry on. So you just want to have the same convenience for your electric vehicle. You want to be making, as you're driving, You're listening, I don't know, maybe to your Jay-Z music, right? And that everything is going right. All of a sudden, bang, 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 you realize that you have no electricity left. What you want to be doing, looking at that, making sure that there is a charging station nearby. You can stop, charge it, and also make sure that you don't want to spend more than half an hour charging it. Otherwise, that would be very, very inconvenient. So that's what it's all about. So for us to make sure that we can replace the fleet of vehicle by EVs, so by e-vehicles, as we told them, electric vehicles, then you want to have some smart charging stations. So as you can see, I'm showing the image with China, but I suspect as well in the near future, you will have the same kind of infrastructure, but in huge number in Europe, in America, and potentially as well in emerging markets like the African continent. So that's the third technology. Now, let me move to the fourth technology. And this fourth technology is the renewable energy power, but not to provide electricity, but to provide heat. Yes, because when you're talking about renewables energy, in general, people will confuse that and just equate that to the power component. This is not all. In fact, when you're talking about renewable energy and when you're talking about sector that release carbon emission to the atmosphere, you know actually there are three components. Yes, there are three components. The first one, we talked about power, industries. Yes, absolutely great. Yeah. Then you also want to look at transport, and I mentioned that some time ago, right? Just before I mentioned this fourth element. And the other one is heating. Yes, heating. Heating is a huge part of the equation because at the moment, what do we use for heating? Most of the time, it is gas and sometimes oil. Yes, this is what we are using. And if we're saying again that we're gonna decarbonize industry, we're gonna decarbonize the world, we're gonna make sure that we transit into a cleaner world. Okay, we've dealt with power. That's great. Oh, we're dealing with power. That's the right term. We haven't dealt with it yet. It's not finished yet, but we're dealing with power. So that means we also need to look at heat, right? So that's important. And that's what we're saying here. We need renewable energy power sources, but to provide heat. And one way to do that, as the picture is showing, is geothermal, right? That's the immediate source that we can think about. But there's also other sources as well. You can simply not just use solar, but obviously making sure that you can connect that to a heating application. This is what we're talking about here. You have that, for example, with solar heating that you use to heat water, right? That's just an example. Last but not the least is the renewable energy power, but to provide hydrogen. And that's what we call usually the green hydrogen. Because producing a hydrogen, I just want to reassure people this is not a new industry per se. It already exists. The difference is here, it's how do you produce this hydrogen, right? So if it's coming, let's say, for example, for marine sources, you call it blue hydrogen. But if it's the traditional way, as now, fossil fuel, this is gray hydrogen, right? But what we're talking about here is green hydrogen that is produced through renewable energy power. And one way, for example, people are looking at doing that, and you can see into the picture, is to use wind energy. And that's one of the equation people are looking at, meaning that those time when it's very windy, right? And excess power is produced. And for whatever reason, you can't send it back to the grid. For whatever reason, you can't use that on site. What can you do? Instead of wasting this power, you can simply capture that and use that to produce hydrogen. And hydrogen, as you know, is easier to store and you can use it at the relevant time. So that's a very promising technology that could be used later on, right? To make sure that we can decarbonize. In fact, hydrogen has great potential to really, because of the non-intermittency factor, and also the fact that we can store it relatively easily. It's basically a great prospect to potentially replace some fossil fuel like gas and oil. Hopefully that makes sense for you. That's great. Let me just stop sharing now and I can go back to my screen. Okay, so these are the five technologies that I have for you to talk about what we can do to decarbonize. So I started First, by those utility scale batteries, those huge batteries that you connect to project going to the grid, right? So that's the first technology. The second, I talked about the behind the meter. Those are the batteries that are used more for users, right? Sort of to manage the demand on site. That's what you can use. Second one. The third one that I talked about. So I talked about those EV smart charging station because I'll say if you're going to be rolling out a fleet of electric vehicle, you will need the infrastructure, and infrastructure aids the EVs. And the fourth, I talk about the renewable energy power, but to produce heat for heating. Yes, that's very important. Last but not the least, I talked about renewable energy power for hydrogen. That's the green hydrogen. So those are the five technologies that we can talk about that will help us to move into the energy transition. So hopefully that was very clear to you. Yeah, that's great. And as I'm talking about that, yes, we need to move into energy transition, but as you would imagine, we need lots of money to do that. We need money to accompany this move towards a new world. Money to accompany the energy transition. And how do you de-risk this money? How can you make sure that people can invest with confidence? That's a topic that I will encourage you to reflect on. For us, as we're speaking right now, we will be running a webinar in collaboration with organizations like EIB, PwC, and also KFW, where we're going to specifically looking at how do you provide more confidence to investors who want to plug in money to invest into the African continent. If you're interested to join, very simple. So how can you do it? So let me just share with you a way to do it. Very simple. So you will see what I have here for you. It's a link. If you click into that, you register to the link, so you should be able to run it. The webinar will be running on Thursday at 2 p.m. I believe. Yeah, 2 p.m. Germany time, and we should be able to talk about that more. So I'm hoping that you have enjoyed the session today. So if you have further questions, make sure you can drop us comments. You can also reach out to me through LinkedIn. I'll make sure that I can respond to you, right? And yeah, so that's what we do. So I'm hoping that you've been able to enjoy the video of today and that you are learning, because that's what this whole channel is all about. As I say, it's about demystifying the energy sector for you and make sure that you can fully understand what it is so you can invest, so you can move into the sector, and you can also find the right solution for your business. So I had a great pleasure talking to you, and I'm very much hoping that together we're going to make the energy transition happen, right? That's great. So this is Tony Tio from Renewables in Africa. And as I usually say, all I have to say is, may the sun be with you. Thank you guys, and ciao.